Welcome to the channel. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about CleanSpark and Bitcoin. We're going to talk about the daily chart, the weekly chart. We'll also take a look at the open options interest for CleanSpark, not for Bitcoin though. And then we'll talk about price targets on both of them, talk about when I'm going to add, when I'm going to trim. We'll have a quick look at some news. I don't think there's too much news out whilst I was away, so we'll talk about some other topics if there's no news available, and we'll take a quick look at what's coming up on the macro calendar. Other than that, you can check out my live portfolio over on eToro. The link for that is in the description down below. I'm just going to check up my portfolio progress for year to date here. Jumping straight in, we can see we had pretty much this gap fill. We talked about that in the last few weeks' videos and all the content we've been putting out, that this was going to be decent short-term resistance. The pullback has been a little bit more substantial than I anticipated, but that's not a negative thing. It's enabled us to scale in a little bit more aggressively. It is down again pre-market. I believe that's because Kamala has had quite a nice weekend. And the expectation there in crypto is that that's going to be a headwind victory if she, gets the presidency. But we'll talk a bit more about that later. I did also want to talk about this pullback here at 921 is going to be quite good support, but we'll also take a look at the open options interest and see what levels the big boys are looking at on that one. To the top side, I think we're going to stick again at this kind of 13.30 level, and then $15, and then 18-ish. So they're key levels to look out for. I wasn't going to trim on these levels, but given this size that I'm adding back in, it might be pertinent for me. Is that the right word? Possibly. I don't know. It might be a smart idea for me to de-risk as price moves up again and take off some of those more recent trades and just treat them more like a swing trade, just so I'm not getting too overweight. The indicators RSI is kind of neutral. It could go either way there. The MACDX Plus looking a little bit more negative than I would like. We've got overbought again yesterday, and then the death crosses started to expand again, which isn't ideal. I prefer to pinch that over to a golden cross, and then flows kind of dropped off as well, so it doesn't look great from that perspective. My price targets for CleanSpark, we always talk about this depending heavily on what Bitcoin does. If Bitcoin gets to my kind of target area between 120 and 240, we could be looking at quite a nice price jump here. Just taking a look at what I've written down. So if Bitcoin gets over kind of 100k, we're looking at about $50 for CleanSpark, but closer to 240, we're looking at about 170, 180. So something to bear in mind. I wouldn't hold all of my position up that high, just to make that super clear. I think I'll be de-risking quite aggressively in the $45 area. That's just how I like to get like a big chunk of the move and bank my games, and then rotate into something that's much better risk reward at that point. And I don't really want to have a huge CleanSpark position when it gets later on in the cycle, because the volatility will be insane. So that's something to bear in mind. Taking a quick look at the weekly though, looks a lot more kind of neutral. We've got RSI flat, MACDX Plus. It can't decide if it wants a death cross or a golden cross. We did have a recent oversold, so it's got a slightly positive tilt, but nothing to get really excited about. And the flow is kind of neutral negative on that one as well. So very mixed bag, but nothing really exciting. But I wouldn't expect us to take out these 780 lows. I think that my expectation is that that's the low of the cycle for now. Looking at the open options interest for this one, it's the start of a new week, so it should give us a pretty good view. The expected move here is quite large actually, but again, it's keeping above that low, so that's nice to see. We don't expect it to go lower. We do have really good support here at 1050. Now we are lower than that currently, so I'd expect to see some people start closing that, so the downside move should start to get a little bit exhausted, as there doesn't seem to be too much interest below that. But on the flip side, there's a lot more interest in a bullish move up to kind of $13 as the resistance there. So kind of fading this move and then accelerating back up should be on par. I wouldn't expect to hit 13 in a week unless something amazing happens. I mean, if Trump wins, that could happen. If Kamala wins, I would probably say that's not going to happen. But pushing out a week, the kind of $8 here as a support, I wouldn't expect we get down to that level. It's possible if Kamala wins, we do. She's not inherently anti-crypto. I think she's kind of on record as saying she's pro-crypto, but with more regulation. Sorry, my dog just walked in rather aggressively. What was I saying? So she wants more regulation. That's going to be a bit of a headwind on here. A lot of the more risk on assets in the crypto space, like the miners and the altcoins, and that will take a hit in the short term, I believe. But pushing out to January 2025, like normal, a much larger expected move here, kind of topping out just over $16. I wouldn't expect us to be down, even if Kamala wins. Whoever wins, I would expect crypto to still have a relatively strong finish through the end of the cycle, as both will have to pump in liquidity to the system. I think one's going to be better short term than the other, but both will even out in the long term. Pulling this down, though, we start to get some quite large strikes to the upside with very little in the way of downside. So again, the market is looking more positively at the long-term timeframes for this one. We'll take a quick look at January 2026, but I expect the cycle to be finished by then. So if anyone's got really high strikes by then, it's probably not ideal. So these folks are the brave folks. I think they will get stung in the end, but they can always close out earlier when they've made some money on the upside. But that depends where the cycle goes. So crypto news, CleanSpark, Bitcoin kind of news that we're dealing with. I did enter a short-term swing trade on Solana, just expecting a bit of a bounce from this level, at least from a risk-reward point of view. The downside support is going to be that bull market band there, so I think it's less than a 1% weighting in my portfolio, so nothing too extreme there. My Cypher and MicroStrategy kind of swing trading, I've stopped. They're not. They need to fall back a lot more for me to be comfortable getting into a swing trade on those ones, given the headwinds that are impacting the overall market. So that's the 10-year bond. That rising is not great. The strong macro data and the lower chance of rate cuts. The market's very risk off, and these things won't typically do super well. So I would expect more downside if that continues. That could change with some of the presidential news, but it's not something I really want to get involved in at this point in the cycle, the macro cycle. That is not the CleanSpark one. News though for CleanSpark, we did have the minor rigs deal with Canan. I don't actually know how to say that, so just whatever it says on the screen there. They haven't really been super specific with the details, so it's either they've made this deal to replace some of the older rigs that they've got, but it's more likely that this is due to the Wyoming delays regarding issues with the Chinese-made ASIC machines. So it's possibly that they've made this deal in order to close the Wyoming deal, but I think it would be the latter of those two options, because they haven't specifically said. I think if it was to replace older rigs, they probably would have just said. But either way, I like that. Also, we had the kind of the grid deal as well. Now, this is going to be dilutive to the shares, but I think it's accretive. And it's really good for the CleanSpark growth plans. I don't want to go too down the road on this one. I might end up putting a post on my website, thecraftytrader.com, for it, just getting the nitty-gritty. But the basics of it are that the deal that they've made will hopefully lead to 400 megawatts added. So that's huge for future growth. And I think currently it was an instant 50 megawatt lift as well. So that's a bonus there. Looking at Bitcoin, so on the daily chart, I don't know how anyone can think technical analysis is just hoodoo voodoo. Look at this beautiful tap on that line, and then another beautiful tap here on the fib, and it really does, it works. It might not be something to set your life by, but it's definitely something to add to your tools, something for your arsenal, help improve your entries and exits, that kind of thing. But what's it going to do now? Well, we're looking quite overbought on a lot of these indicators, so it looks like it wants to pull back. I'm actually quite surprised how well this is holding up, given that Kamala's had quite a good weekend. So, I mean, I expect if things look more like the tides are turning, we'll see more of a drop off here. Tesla's certainly having a pullback as well on the news, and the more risk on assets are kind of pulling back a little bit. That might just be some kind of investing hesitation, people wanting to de-risk going into some turbulent times. But that could also provide some excellent entries. So if we did pull back down to this purple line, buy that dip because that's a good one. The bull market band here as well has flipped green, so that one will be very supportive to price if it gets down there. So I would actually really like to buy more Bitcoin down at that level, please. But we shall see. Upside though, kind of we still haven't hit the measured move here at 78.2, whatever, counting the niggly bits, the extra dollars. But I would expect if there is an upside move to hit that quickly. If we just pull this down a little bit so I can see these top targets. So you can see why my thesis is kind of sticking with one kind of 20 approaching these lines here. So I think between 100 and 120 is definitely in the bag. Even if Kamala wins, I think I would still expect to reach those lower levels. I think it's going to be a muted rally just because the timelines and liquidity coming in and all that stuff. But I think a Trump victory is more likely to push things higher faster. So we'll get more to the higher targets on that one. RSI is kind of neutral, so at the minute it could go either way, breaking high, breaking low, and flows kind of just stalled out as well. Let's look at the weekly real quick. Okay, so there's my one kind of 29 kind of measured move target on that one. I would expect that one to hit if Trump wins, but maybe not if Kamala wins. Maybe something more conservative along this orange line if Kamala wins. So getting more just under my primary target there. But that's still a great move. We can still make lots of money in that environment. RSI on the weekly kind of neutral as well. The MACD X Plus looks pretty healthy. Institutions still coming in quite aggressively, and flow is okay. So it's better than on the daily, but something to be aware of that it looks quite tired. Can't actually see the volume on here, which is annoying. I've written too much stuff on there, but all looks good. So being that it's Monday, we didn't have any macro data yesterday. We do have some today, but nothing really exciting. Factory orders, bleh, boring, bill auctions, all that boring stuff that no one pays attention to. Tuesday, however, we do have lots of services data. We always talk about manufacturing data being a bit of a dead space these days. So the service is definitely one to look out for. The expectation there is kind of, nothing exciting, pretty much just unchanged, I would imagine. What else tomorrow? Balance of trade. Nothing that exciting happened there for a while. It is going to be a very choppy week though. The election closes on Tuesday. It can take a while for the final results to come out. It depends how dominant of a victory either side have got. If it's going to be close, then it will take longer. So that's something to bear in mind. But we also this week have the Fed rate decision, so that's going to be another big thing the market's looking at. I would expect them to do another cut, a small one, not necessarily, but because they need it, but mainly because it sends the wrong message if they don't cut now. I think that's the kind of way they'll go with it. More jobs data. Now the jobs data has been quite wild lately. But it's definitely something the market still pays attention to. Again, we'll start seeing a lot of seasonality coming into these numbers, and also recovery efforts from the hurricane damage, and that should be a bit of a boost to some of this stuff. But it's going to be a choppy week. I hope you're all feeling calm and relaxed, and you're probably going to have a glass of wine at the open on some of these days because it's about to get choppy. Apologies for the slightly lagging video today. The audio came out fine, but for some reason when I went back and I looked at my recordings, they had a lot of lagging. We'll try and improve on that on tomorrow's video. But for the meantime, give this video a like, share with your buddies, your grandma, your uncle, your dog, whoever, and subscribe to the channel. And I will see you tomorrow for Tesla Tuesday.